how camp started, how camp continued to grow, and how camp continues to grow even to this day. So thank you for coming. I appreciate you all being here tonight. What is my experience with camp? Well, I was a former camper back in 1976. My parents sent me out there. I did not want to go as well. And I fought tooth and nail. I don't want to go to camp. I don't want to go to camp. By the end of the week, I didn't want to leave. So again, just, it was that a wonderful experience for me. So what I'm going to do is start off with just in terms of obviously the most important question really when we talk about the starting of camp is the Gard family. So the Gard family, there are really two important people. Letty Gard, she actually grew up in Rossville, so over on Ross Avenue. Her father was a coppersmith. Her high school sweetheart was none other than Homer Gard. Yes, so she married him. And they had one son. And they named their son after Homer's first boss, who was Mr. Campbell. So his middle name Campbell came from his first boss. But Homer, on the other hand, was from a very prominent family in Hamilton. If you know anything about the Gard family, his father was a prosecutor, actually at one point owned a newspaper in Hamilton. His brother was a U.S. congressman, so he actually spent a lot of time in Washington. And he was a community leader. In 1913, he helped with the flood, so that was something that was very important. He was also very important in the Y movement. And, he was the editor, the publisher, and the owner of what we call the Journal News. So that was very, very important. So let's talk about Richard Campbell Gard. So here he is, obviously with Letty. Here he is with his grandfather, and this is Homer right here. Some pictures of him growing up. He was a tennis champion here in town. He went to Amherst, went to University of Wisconsin for a little bit. He actually worked for his dad for 2 years, and then he enlisted in the field artillery. I don't know why he wanted to do that, but he wanted to go to World War I, and he enlisted. And then he volunteered actually for the Aviation Corps, and he flew in planes, actually more as an observer, but also somebody that dropped bombs if they saw something that they wanted to bomb. He was involved in crashes, maybe more than one, we think, and also may have been gassed in World War I. Survived all of that, right? Survived all of that, came back to Hamilton, started working for his dad again. He was 4 days before his wedding, and he was sitting at his desk. He was going to go to Cincinnati to get his marriage license, and he put his head down on his desk. This was in the morning, and everyone thought he was taking a nap, right? But he died. Yeah. So traumatic as it was for us to hear, think about Homer and think about Letty. So they were devastated. Not even devastated, they were more than devastated. And you can read, this is Homer's words right here. He says, "Captain lies fallen cold and dead. I must never forget that I have a compact with his memory, a trust to which I must be true. His tongue is mute, his whistle is stilled, his smile is gone, but his spirit commands me and will command me through the years." So think about that. Again, they were devastated, and they thought, what are we going to do? This is our prince. This is the person that was going to take over the Journal News. But obviously, he was gone. He did die of viral myocarditis, which is not uncommon sometimes in that age group. So what happens is they get a virus. There are certain viruses that will attack the heart, weaken the heart muscle, and then they die. And that's what happened to Richard Campbell Gard. So what happened was the Gard said, we want to make a living memorial to Campbell Gard. And so what they did was they went around to different camps. They thought about it for a while, and then they wrote a letter. You can see the letter to the YMCA, to the board of directors, and they said, we want to donate a camp to the Y, and we want it to be a living memorial for our son, right? And the other thing is, and this is back in 1926, right? In giving this living memorial to camp, we ask that it always be available for boys and girls of any race, color, or religion. Think about that for a minute. 1926, right? That's amazing. That's so different than what we think of back in 1926, but they were already very forward thinkers. And so they were very, very important in the way they set it up. Again, in terms of the camp itself, you can see this is actually sort of the original one. So they had the 5 different cabins right here. This was actually the wash house. So the cabins themselves were not air conditioned. Some of those who were before 1970s know about that. They were just basically opened up cabins. And then here was the dining hall and then the rec hall. So they had some baseball fields, and over here these were the cabins for the directors, the nurse, and things like that as well too. But what they initially did was have 5 cabins, and then they grew to 10. So you can see this picture's a little bit older. And then this was on 30 acres just around the bend of the Great Miami River. Okay? So let's look at camp itself. So in terms of camp, this is actually the very opening was on June 28th, 1926, which we are going to celebrate 100 years on Saturday. Okay? If you look right here, here's Homer, and here's Luddy, and this is the flag that they actually flew on the day, and then all the boys lined up and they're saluting the flag, right? So that was big. They were important in terms of they wanted an entrance, right? So they had an entrance off of Augsburger Road. This is the rec hall, which we now call Idle Hall. In addition, they had electric refrigerators and stoves. This is in 1926, right? That was really state-of-the-art. Dishwasher, potato peeler, again, state-of-the-art. And cabin slept 12, but the big thing, china. And we do still have some. So if you go to the exhibit next door, you'll see that there actually is china. And that was something that Luddy and Homer thought, wow, we really want to have something that's special for these boys that are out there. When they did build it, and this is the rec hall, they put in a memorial fireplace, and over the fireplace you can see that is Campbell Gard, right? So if you go through the exhibit, you'll see pictures of Campbell Gard. And then in addition, this is something that Homer liked to do, is he would give cups, silver cups, to the boys for things that they did well. So if they were the best camper of the summer or things like that, they got a cup, a silver cup that was given to them. One of the most famous, obviously, people that went out to camp that we all know about is Robert McCloskey. Did everybody know that his first name was John? No. It was John. John Robert McCloskey. And the interesting thing, and you see right here, that's to remind me that he was for the Society for the Prevention of Calling Lavatories, not John. So he didn't like John, so he's like, don't call me John, my name is Robert McCloskey. But he was obviously, a famed writer and illustrator. You can see this is him here when he was a younger boy. This is in the very, very beginning in the 1930s. These are caricatures that he did of many of the people that are out at camp, and you can see those. So some of the people here, like this is Charlie Klippel, who was one of the second directors of camp that we'll talk about. He was very important in terms of music. So he obviously had harmonicas. He would actually do this thing where he would play a harmonica, he would take it out of his mouth, and he would have a second harmonica hidden in his mouth, and he would still play. I mean, he was just very, very talented. In addition, obviously, the most thing that we all know about is he built the totem pole, right? And so the totem pole is very important in terms of camp. Here's the totem pole right here. And then later on, obviously, this is from Boston. So that's Make Way for Little Ducklings. That's the illustration that he did, the book that he did, right? Other important people. So Casey Klippel. So Casey Klippel was the second director of camp, and Casey Klippel was from Iowa, and I'll get into him a little bit further, but he had a relationship with a man named Isaac Grayearth. So Isaac Grayearth was a Sioux warrior, he was a chief, and he came to camp because Casey said, hey, will you come to camp, and will you show my boys a little bit about what you experienced, what you learned? And sure enough, he did. Here he is learning from the boys, and one of the things they did was they went over and they saw this. So this is Rentschler Forest, and that is the earthwork that's over there on the other side of the river from Camp Campbell Gard. So Casey went over there with Grayearth, and guess who was in the boat with them? Robert McCloskey. Robert McCloskey. And how do I know that? Because Rue Klippel talked about it. So Rue Klippel was the son of Casey Klippel, and he talked about how they went over there and they looked at that earthwork and they thought, wow, that is really fascinating. And so when they came back, well, actually, you can see him dance. I didn't know that was going to work. But when they came back, that's when Robert McCloskey got the idea at age 14, of building the totem pole. It took him 2 years. It was 15 feet long. It was actually a log of cedar that was from the Strauss building. So they were tearing down the building, and Casey saw that, and he said, hey, can I have that piece of wood? I'm going to take it out to camp, and I'll see if one of the boys will want to carve on it. And sure enough, Robert McCloskey said, yes, I want to carve on that. And so here he carved on it, and if you didn't already know, each of these is a different thing that he picked up. So the Thunderbird for victory, turtle for perseverance, a widget which was for prevention of selfishness. So if you caught too many fish, you needed to share your fish. So that was important in that culture. And then in addition, the fox for cunning and sly, buffalo for stability, and the frog for patience and willingness, right? So this is a 100-year-old structure. Here it is. Again, a little bit later, this is in color. And if you look right here, that is our CEO, Mike Bramer, and he's actually looking at the totem pole, which is now at the Central YMCA. So if you want to see it, it is actually something that you can go and see as well. Other interesting things that people don't always realize too, when you look on the back of this, so on the back of it, there is a face right here in blue right now, because that's the way they painted it, and it actually is to the Native American. It was faced towards Rentschler, and it was of the Native Americans. So it was his homage to the Native Americans that helped him think about this structure in terms of when he built it. Other things to think about with camp, some of you may or may not know, but obviously he had a signal cannon. It's called a Winchester signal cannon. It was a 12-grade shotgun shell. It was a blank. But what they would do is they would pull up the flag in the morning and they would shoot off that shell. And if you talk to Steve Ittle, who is actually one of the sons of Maurice Ittle, he will tell you that he still has ringing in his ears from that shotgun shell going off. And we're going to try and attempt to shoot it off on Saturday. So if you want to come out on Saturday. But again, something that's very important. After it was disappeared, they did play reveille as well. And then bugle, they did taps, which was typically played at dusk by anybody that could play a bugle would play with that. Other important things, again, in 1957, the dinner bell, which is still rung to this day. So the dinner bell was donated in 1957 by the Baldwin, Lima, and Hamilton, which was a precursor, or actually it was after Niles Tool Works, so that became one of the entities after that. And it was from the last American steam locomotive, and it was actually just one of those things they said, we're going to give this to camp and keep it as a memento. In addition, they had a Victorian organ that was in the dining hall, so didn't withstand some things we'll talk about a little bit later, but that was always something that was very important as well too in the beginning. Some things about camp that was very important in the very beginning, camp limericks and songs, right? So anybody want to stand up and try and say this for me? Anybody? We had the camp director actually in front of all the staff get up there and he tried to say that. He did a very good job, I will tell you. He did a very good job. But that's a lot of words to say, but those are things that many times people would say. In addition, like John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, when I grew up, I always thought that was a Barney song because of my kids, but that was a camp song. That was not a Barney song. So, and if you look right here, this is Terry Carroll there singing away. I don't know what he was singing, but he was singing something. Other important things were the campfire circle. So there was a opening along the Great Miami River. This was actually something that none other than Robert McCloskey helped design. So he designed the semicircle for the opening. And then in terms of the closing was in the woods. And so you can see there was actually more of a seat right here, and there used to be a tree there. So that's where people like Larry Delosier would sit with all his regalia when he would sit there. And they would have an elaborate thing where they would have a string with some, I think probably alcohol on it, and they'd light the string and it would come down and light the fire, and everyone would be like, how did that start? But it was magic, right, for the kids that were there. So people remember that. They're like raising their hand, oh yeah, I remember that. Another thing about camp, and this is something that when you talk about Homer Gard and Luddy Gard, when they started camp, again, from the outset, they wanted facilities that were for special needs. So they embedded accessibility and service to children with disabilities in the camp. So again, that was very important. You can see here, this is actually Bill Christensen. So he's here, and I think his daughter is one of those right there as well too, Ann Brown. Again, over here, some other ones, and then more recent ones you can see here. But again, in terms of the fact that it was always for everybody, and that was something that Homer Gard and Luddy Gard really wanted to impress upon everybody that came to camp, and still to this day as well. Anybody know that there was a dining hall fire? Yeah, so there was a really severe fire. So in 1940, the dining hall burned to the ground, including that parlor organ, which we talked about earlier, right? So it was gone. And if you look, you look right here, see what they saved? You know what that is? That's all the china. So the boys went in, they got the china, and they actually had like a bucket brigade trying to put out this fire, which they couldn't do anything about. But they saved the china, couldn't save the building. And so the building was rebuilt. And the other interesting thing about it, if you read the Journal News, they only lost 1 day of camp. How did they do that? They just threw up a tent, and then they had a dining hall. So, we think about, what would we do if everything burned to the ground, just put up a tent, we're going to have a dining hall tomorrow. Which is fascinating. So, one of the things that is interesting about Camp 2 was when they initially built camp, they didn't have an outdoor pool. And so Casey Klippel's son, Rue, when he was a little boy, went up to Homer Gard at one point and said to Homer, "When are you going to put in an outdoor pool?" And he didn't know any better. And everyone was like, "Oh, you shouldn't have said that." But Homer was good to his word. And he did, in 1949, put in an outdoor pool. And the reason was because of the fluctuations in the Great Miami River. There were times where people couldn't swim, so they could swim in the pool. And in 2006, it was updated as well. How about the flood? Anybody know about the flood? Yes, so there was a severe flood out there as well, too. These are some pictures from Steve Ittle that he shared with me. And if you look right here, you'll see right there, that's the height of the water right there. It was very, very high. This was in January, so nobody was out there camping, thank goodness. But you can see the devastation here. This is actually where the trestle was. And if you read that, so the second highest recorded flood since 1913, they actually found a hole where the trestle was, and they thought, let's just put a little bit of gravel, we'll be fine. Fill it up, right? 17 loads later. This was a huge void, so what happened, it just swirled in and just dug into the ground, and he had a huge, huge swirl that was there. So there was actually some real damage that was done by this flood. But again, got it back to working. Here are some footprints where they got all muddy when they went to clean it up. But again, people just went to work and cleaned up the camp. So it was good as new for the campers to come out there. This is a list of some of the camp executive directors. Terry Carroll's here with us. Take a bow, Terry. Karen Staley is with us as well, too. So again, some people that are with us as well. Am I missing anybody else that's here that was a camp director? Nobody else? Okay. Because I know that was somebody else who was possibly coming. But, some of these names you will be familiar with. So Klippel was one that obviously people know about. Maurice Ittle, we'll talk about him. Pick Pickens was important. Bill Christensen, we're going to talk about him a little bit as well, too. Somebody talked to me on the way in about Ron Choquette. Larry Delosier obviously was very important as well. And then some of the more recent one with Dom Coffey being the most recent one currently. Let's talk about Casey Klippel for a minute. So he was the second executive director. He's the one that was there when Robert McCloskey was there. And I think he was a big proponent of helping Robert McCloskey. So his name was Casey. He went to Methodist College. He was a World War I veteran. And he didn't really like the military, particularly in terms of the regimented purpose of military, so he was somewhat more flexible when it came to the boys, whereas some people, some of the Y directors in the past were very inflexible. Thank you for giving me some water. His wife was Ruby. And then the most important thing really is he was a lifelong, had an interest in Native Americans, which again we talked about with the totem pole. And then he had two sons, Charlie. This is Charlie right here, the taller one. And he became a pediatric surgeon in Toledo. And then Rue, who I met and talked to, and he was taught by Robert McCloskey and became an artist. So here's little Rue, and there's Charlie. And here they are again. There's Charlie right there, and then Rue, and then this is Casey. Casey when he was older, and again, Casey, these were provided by John Klippel, his grandson. So I really appreciated him giving me those as well, too. Talk about Maurice Ittle. I think Maurice Ittle still is out at camp. I don't think he's ever left. All right? So he never really has left. This is him with Robert McCloskey. So he was out there in the very beginning. He actually went there as a 4-H person at age 13. His nickname was Curly. He spent a total of 40 summers at camp, 37 summers, but 40 years at camp. He never left camp in many ways. So he was on the board like I was. I mean, he just kept doing everything for camp. He was important in terms of outdoor education with camp. Interesting things about him, I mean, he started community gardens, so he would have kids from Edgewood come and actually learn how to plant gardens out at camp. But he was tone deaf, so this is something that Steve Ittle talked about. So they would be singing camp songs, and in the middle of the camp songs, they would stop everybody from singing and leave Curly out to sing. And he was tone deaf and he couldn't sing. And then they would all laugh about it. And then the other interesting thing was he could not swim. So even though he was out at camp, he never went in the water because he did not swim. And obviously his son Steve wrote about camp life as well too. That's why we know a lot about Maurice and we know about camp. But great pictures. This is actually Steve right here, little Stevie. And that's actually obviously the totem pole that you can see. And then this is the rec hall, which is now called Ittle Hall in honor of Maurice Curly Ittle. So, Bill Christensen, we have Pat Brown in the back. So Pat, his wife Ann, is in this picture right here. So there's Bill, and then Ann's in there, Ann Brown. Here's Bill as well too. And then over here, I think I talked about earlier, there's Bill with, again, these are special needs kids as well. So he attended the YMCA Abe Lincoln camp. His wife was Ardell. His frustrating thing was he had 4 daughters. If he had boys and girls, it might have been different, but because he had 4 daughters and this was a boys' camp at the time in the 50s, 60s, he went on to a different camp. So he didn't stay at Camp Campbell Gard. He was a very enthusiastic singer. If you ask the girls, they talk about how he allowed mice to be sent to space. And that was a time when people were thinking about sending people to space, like to the moon, like, oh gosh, you don't want to send people to the moon. But it was just a fun thing that they did for the family. Mr. D, so Larry Delosier. A lot of people probably have heard of Larry Delosier, right? He's the longest serving director out there. He was totally immersed in camp and swept them in it. He was the one that was important in terms of modifying and improving the cabins out at camp in the 75, 76 era. So again, he was an ordained minister, and people may not have known that, and he was originally from Tampa, Florida. And the other interesting thing is his daughter spent 11 summers out at camp. Even though she was a daughter, she did spend summers out at camp. So in the 70s, she was the one daughter that did stay and learned a lot, and I learned a lot from talking with Melanie. So. Here's Camp Gard staff, and the biggest thing I wanted to show with this picture is just the change. So you can see this is 1930. These are a bunch of boys, right? And as we go along, again, still boys and men. Getting a little bit older, there's starting to be some girls in there, starting to be some girls and women. And then you can see here, obviously very co-ed, and all the way in, it's again, the importance of the fact that the Y changed, and the Y changed for the better. So we allowed not just boys, but girls to come out at camp. And even in the beginning, there was 4-H camp, which was boys and girls. So it wasn't like it was just boys camp, but clearly became more of a co-ed camp. I actually talked to a lot of the directors or the previous directors of camp, and this is one that I talked with was Pete Fasano. And one of the things that he said, and said better than I can say, he said this. He said, summer at Camp Campbell Gard is really a magical time. The energy is something I couldn't hope to describe, but it fills the air, it lifts your spirit, and it causes your heart to race all at the same time. Yeah, pretty impressive, right? So, I think that's awesome. And again, how do you do it? You're doing it while you're working with camping behaviors, you're evaluating camp equipment, you're creating schedules, you're dealing with the weather, with parents, double-checking everything's safe, and all the while you're forming a relationship with campers. Think about how hard it is to be a counselor out at camp. But yet they're all doing it, and they do it every year. So it's really cool, So anybody that's a camp counselor, thank you very much if you were a camp counselor, because you made a difference. So we appreciate that. Again, these are some of the campers over the years. So this is cabin 10 in 1928. So they used to just take a picture of the boys out in front of their cabin. And then over the years, you can see 65, 68, 71. This is 1976. If you look right there, that's me. I'm in there. If you look at this one from 79, that's another person that we know. And then 2001, 2019. Again, 4-H camp, so this is boys and girls. So again, in terms of over the years, lots and lots of people have attended camp. Thousands of people have attended camp, really. In terms of cooks and custodians, there are a lot of great cooks and custodians, so just a few that we tried to keep names of, so you can see the list there. Some of the ones that stand out, like the Hornsby family, the Flume family. Marie Griffin, she has a plaque over the dining hall, actually, where she is there as well, too. Nurses, so there's the Becketts, the Shoemakers, the Popples. I think there's a Popple here. Is there a Popple here? Yay! So thank you for your contribution to Camp Campbell Gard. Secretaries, Judy Goodpasture and Donna Danikin, so very important in terms of helping with camp. And then international students, so something that people don't always realize is that always, really for many, many years, there's always been international students from camp. And they've come from all over. So you can see the list right there. And I may have missed a few, but again, those are some of the more common ones that we see that have come up over the years that have come to camp. I'm going to talk about somebody right here. There's actually a portrait. So you may not have noticed it when you came in. Anybody know who that is? It's this person right here. So Etheline Grove Gard Graham. She's very important in terms of camp. And she's somebody that probably was underappreciated at camp. So she has a great story. She was actually the youngest of 16 children, grew up near Harper's Ferry in West Virginia. Her mother was widowed. They had a farm at one point and they lost it. And then she became an RN, went to Washington, D.C. And I think I talked about the fact that Homer's brother was in Washington, D.C., so he was a congressman. And Homer was having some health issues and Letty was having some health issues, so they went to Washington, D.C. to be taken care of. So while they were there, guess who Homer met? He met, yes, Etheline. So unfortunately in 1934, Letty died. She had a stroke and she passed away. And soon after that, Homer said, hey, Etheline, would you like to come to Hamilton? She was 25 years old. She had only been a nurse for a year. And she made the decision to come. A year later, she married Homer Gard. And he was 69 years old, right? Yeah. But it helps when you own the newspaper, right? So at 34, she had a butler and a cook. I mean, think about how nice that was. But then at 44, she became the publisher because Homer died. So that's very important too. How many women in the 50s were the head of something as important as the Journal News? She was. She was, right? So very, very important. And then the other thing, the most important thing she did remarry, but when she died in 1970 of pneumonia, she did this. She wrote in her will, and you can read it. This is actually at the archives, that she was going to give basically the bulk of her estate to Camp Campbell Gard. She didn't have to do that, right? So she came from 16, right? She was one of 16. She could have given it, because probably some of her brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews were still around. She could have given it to them, but she followed Homer's wishes. Homer's wish was that a living memorial still be something that's important for Campbell Gard. And so she followed that wish, and she gave the bulk of her estate to Camp Campbell Gard, which we're obviously forever indebted to. In terms of camp, I already talked a little bit about this. So again, it grew from 5 to 10 lodges. The original cabins were replaced in 1975. Soon after, they had Summer Village. In 1997, 96, obviously, we had the Hughes Center and the dairy farm, so we actually grew from kind of 30 acres to 300 acres to 600 acres, so this big thing. Again, we talked about the outdoor pool, the Jenny Martin. This is the art center that was put in. Here's the dining hall was expanded again. High ropes course, sometimes people don't realize too that our high ropes course is for all. So if you have a disability, it should not stop you if you want to go to the high ropes course. So that's very important as well too. And again, the modernization of the pool, and then the last thing, which is really the most recent thing, is the Mike and Cindy Dingledine Recovery Center, Discovery Center, I'm sorry. So here's a schematic. This is actually a map of what camp kind of looks like, but this is actually a picture that Larry Delosier took. He went up in a plane, and he took a picture down of camp. And you can see here's Augsburger Road. Here used to be a kind of mini go-kart course, and then this is the lane back into camp. This is camp right here. And then this is obviously the new addition, which is the barn right here for the Hughes Center as well, too. Okay, so where's Green-nosed Harpy? It's right in here. No, I'm sorry, right in here. Right in there with the trestle. Yeah, with the trestle. And the one thing that happened was when they did the sewers and changed the sewers, what happened was the tunnel that was the Green-nosed Harpy tunnel was taken away. Yeah, so the boys and the girls that go out to camp now, they don't know about Green-nosed Harpy. But it's like everything. There's traditions that some have kept and some have not. Like the signal cannon, disappeared. But yeah. The what? The Loge. Tell us about that. Oh, and the Green-nosed Harpy. Well, there have always been ghosts and other things. So if you ask some of the more recent camp counselors, they came up with all kinds of things. So the older ones knew about Green-nosed Harpy. The newer ones just came up with other fun ones, right? So if you talk to them, I'm sure they'll tell you about it. In the beginning, activities-wise, they used to have rifle range. And if you would shoot, you could get an NRA card, believe it or not. But now we have a rock range, okay? So it's a little simpler. Swimming, canoeing, boating, crafts, always been a big part of camp. Hiking, horsebacking, so horseback riding, here she is. Actually, this is the most recent one as well, too. The other important thing that they always had was the rest period. So the rest period was so you could write home to camp, from camp to your parents and say how wonderful you were having a time. And if you know anything about Woody Fitton wrote a nice note to his parents about how wonderful camp was. So, other things that were done were, again, snipe hunts. We talked about Green-nosed Harpy. Skits were a big thing, especially when it was raining. Pranks were very important. Everybody was pulling pranks on everybody else. So they would take the picture of ethylene, but it wasn't out there, thank God. But they had other pictures and they would hide them, right? And they were like, where's Campbell Gard's picture? Where's Homer Gard's picture? And well, the counselors would hide it under Larry D's bed. So he didn't know it was under his bed. He couldn't find it, but they would do all kinds of crazy stuff. Chapel was very important. Here's the chapel out in the woods. It did blow down, and then they put it actually in the dining hall. And then this is Darren Corns, actually. He was canoeing out there as well, too. So he was a former. So house system, this is something that's more recent. So again, in terms of more recently, now when students go out to camp, what they have is they have different houses. So Delosier, we already know about Larry D. Thunderdurtles, Graham, now we know about ethylene. So the River Wolves, McCloskey, we know about, obviously, the Mighty Mallards, and then Klippel we talked about, which is the Nighthawks. So those are the four different, we have some, okay. What are you? Klippels, all right, so we got Klippels. Anybody else in here? Graham? No? I gave this talk and actually out at camp, and they all were going crazy about, I'm a Graham, I'm a Klippel, I'm a Delosier. So it was fun. It was great. What's the legacy of camp? I mean, you talk about 100 years. When I went into this about a year ago, there are tens of thousands of pictures. There's videos from way back in the beginning to now. There are written stories from the camp directors' children. It's just immense, the stuff, the legacy that this place has left, right? So again, in terms of it's touched everybody differently, everybody probably in here that raised their hand in the beginning has a story about camp. My story was different. When I went out to camp, I came home from camp. I'm going to go ahead and tell this. And my socks wouldn't stay up. And my mom's like, why are your socks not staying up, Jeff? And I'm like, well, Sandy Parrish, who was my camp counselor at the time, he taught us how to make bow and arrows out of the elastic in our socks and twigs. So I ruined all my socks. But I mean, they're just funny little anecdotes or stories like that. But the campers served, outdoor education was important, school groups, band camps, 4-H, the families that have been out there for years and years, like the Popples and the Flumes and people like that, the staff that have been out there, the special needs campers that got benefit from going out to camp, where really they may not have gotten it anywhere else. And then in terms of the camp mergers, that's something that also is really important. There were a lot of people that met other people out at camp and, believe it or not, got married. So that's important as well, too. When I did this, again, I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged everybody. There's lots of people. It wasn't just me that put this presentation together. So if you look at this list, there's a lot of people that are on this list, many of the people that are sitting in this room today. So I want to thank everybody that helped me do this. It was a combined effort. It was wonderful to talk to lots of old camp directors and camp directors' children and try and collect a lot of stuff, because I learned a lot about camp, and I learned how special and how important camp is to everybody. So that's really all I have to say. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take questions. Any questions? Yes?
What time is the thing on Saturday?
So there's going to be a talk here at 10 o'clock. It's going to be the same talk that I just gave. And then starting at 4 o'clock,